Thank you for joining us on this webinar of how can a coaching culture help your organization. We have about an hour and a half today where Tony, our CEO of Transcend International, will be presenting. I know from his style that he's very engaging, so he might pause every now and then to ask some questions and engage you guys as the audience, because this webinar is actually exclusive for those in our database and network. And most of you, if not all of you, are within the HR people development function within your organizations. So we wanted to dedicate this webinar as a kind of high-level systemic discussion on coaching culture within organizations. Tony, if you can go to the next slide.
I'll try.
And I know that it's just an intro on Transcend, which most of you, or if all of you, might know, but I know some people have referred their networks to this webinar as well. So for those of you who don't know about Transcend, as you can see here, we're a small but global organization. You know, we have an office here in Hong Kong, but also in China and in a small operation in Europe. But we do work with clients and organizations from all around the world with the mission to help them build value-creating teams and enhance their leaders' ability to make wise decisions in critical moments that serve them, but also their people's sustainable flourishing. And we'll be unpacking this mission throughout this presentation, what it stands for and what's our point of view in that when we work with organizations. And the interesting thing about the topic for today, coaching culture, is that it takes our core work, which is the coaching, whether it's coaching with executives one-on-one or team, or actually supervising and mentoring coaches. And the other part of our work, which is training, leadership training, coach training, but also mindfulness-based training through our sister organization, Potential Project. It takes all this work, which is considered to be very grassroots, very with people, and takes out the more high-level insights, the more systemic insights on how can organizations, starting with its people, start creating what we call a coaching culture. And with us today, who'll be presenting on this is Tony Dickel, who is our CEO. Tony, a lot of you know Tony. So he's the CEO of Transcend International, but also the country director for our sister organization, Potential Project, in Greater China. He has deep experience and ties with global coaching organizations such as the ICF and EMCC. Also decades of experience in the industry, in leadership levels in sectors like the financial services sector, but also in management consulting. For those of you who know Tony, he's also a mindfulness-based teacher, but also a practicing psychotherapist. A lot of work in coaching and leadership to be speaking about the more systemic part of it today. So with that, I'll hand to you, Tony. You can add anything I forgot also.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. So Sam said, for those of you that know me, I'm also a psychotherapist and a mindfulness-based trainer as well. That also applies to those of you that don't know me as well, by the way. So that's my attempt at humor to get us started. It was almost a joke. I also just wanted to add something that, you know, there's some very lofty claims, if you wish, that we're making about ourselves, you know, on this slide, that we have 300 or so, in fact, it's 500 actually now, multinational clients, 150 or so coaches and facilitators in 28 countries, etc. That is the collective. That's us and our core partners that collectively are offering in a very seamless way these if you wish, competencies. All right, so there you go. All right, so we're talking today about coaching culture, and there's been so much that's been spoken and written about this topic over the years. But what we're going to do today is we're going to offer a modern take on it. the world has changed externally, and also with the way that people are motivated, in ways that have needed us over the past few years to rethink the whole subject of how people can feel inspired, enabled, empowered, and engaged by their companies so that they can bring their best to their work. So this talk is really meant to be provocative and grounded in the reality of what some of the best learning organizations are actually doing today. And the content of this has been drawn not only from our own work in Transcend Potential Project, CMI and GTCI, but also from some of the giants in the field of leadership research, including the likes of Robert Kegan, Lisa Lahey, Jennifer Garvey-Berger, and of course, professors David Clutterbuck, who's a very close friend of ours, and Peter Hawkins as well. So we've got a lot of our own research on this, and we're also standing on the shoulders of giants when it comes to being able to talk about this topic. Okay, so let's look at as a sort of an overall starting point at, oh, and by the way, maybe just before I sort of get into it, there's potentially a huge amount of material to cover here, and we're only going to be able to scratch the surface, and yet even then there's a lot of stuff. And there's a danger that I will just start talking and not stop. And so what I really would like you to do is I'm going to try to pause from time to time to invite questions. But given the number of people that we've got, we're not going to sort of have breakout kinds of discussions or anything like that. It'll be too difficult to do. So it's going to be more of a lecture-y style, together with pausing for questions and comments and any debates. But if you want to say something, or if you've got something to say, please feel free to use the chat. Sam will be monitoring the chat. And so if you want to say something or you've got a comment, stick it into the chat and we'll try to make sure that we bring it into the room. Okay, so there's that. I'll probably be talking for about 50 minutes or maybe an hour. And then what we're going to do is have a Q&A session, which may or may not, depending on how things go, include breakout rooms. All right, so there's that. So let's talk a little bit about what's actually going on in the world of leadership, because it's useful to know this, because what we need to do is to build the business case for a coaching culture. Why do we even need to think about coaching, or what we call a modern coaching culture? And the first thing to talk about is this move from, or the necessary move from, task-oriented to people-oriented cultures. So this is going away from subject matter or technical expertise, especially in leadership, to the expertise in developing teams and the expertise in building learning cultures, which includes building high-performing or value-creating teams that have shared purposes, shared vision, shared mission, which is a really, really big subject. But it's the idea of teams being able to act in service of creating value with and for all of the team stakeholders. And this is an emerging area, sometimes known as team coaching or team coaching culture. Area here is this business of moving from individual leadership to what has been called distributed leadership. So know this, that in the modern world that we're going to talk a little bit more about in a minute, research indicates that the so-called heroic, charismatic, transformational team leaders are kind of dead in the water. Then, of course, these types of leaders are needed in some cases, particularly where there is very, very difficult change that needs to be front-led to be done. But generally, the heroic, charismatic team leader is being de-emphasized in favor of collective and collaborative team leadership. And that means leaders that are able to build collaborative partnerships across changing boundaries. Sometimes we call it boundary spanning leadership, a leadership which is really agile, that leads in turn to cross-functional, siloless teams, which co-create beneficial value for and with stakeholders. And this is also known as distributed leadership. So distributed leadership, again, it's another very, very big topic, but in a nutshell, it's where all of the functions of leadership are actually present, but they're not situated in just only the team leader. They are distributed across the members of the organization or the teams. Okay, so that's the second trend that we need to be cognizant of. And it's interesting that on that, a CEO of a large international organization actually said this to us. Basically, said this. He said, "I have lots of coaches who coach my people. I've got lots of consultants who consult to various different parts of my organization, but that's actually not where I realize that my challenges actually lie. All of the real challenges in this organization are not in the parts or the people, but actually in the connections between them and the relationships between them." And that is becoming more and more true. So moving from outer game towards inner game. So this really, sometimes we talk about this business of cultivating resilience so that we can work better with uncertainty and ambiguity, which is a facet of the modern world, where the focus is moving towards cultivating kind of, we might say, values or core mental qualities. I'm sorry, I'm just being distracted by the waiting room. Just Sam, can I just know that you've got the waiting room? I'm sure you have.
Yep. Yeah.
Good luck, thank you. Cultivating these core mental qualities which enable us to be able to meet stress and overwhelm more skillfully, which increases our capacity then to live with this, and also with the uncertainty that life is throwing at us. Sometimes we call these first arrows, the arrows that life fires at us. And how can we deal with those arrows that land upon us and actually create discomfort and pain for us? But how can we avoid throwing second, third, and fourth arrows at ourselves because of the way that our minds individually engage with the first arrows? So we talk about outside in and inside out. Outside in means we need to be aware of what's going on all around us. And inside out means we need to know how we are engaging with all of that so that we can show up in service of what is actually called for. All right. As the CEO of Unilever, a gentleman called Alan Jope, spoke about this, and he said, and Alan Jope is a client of Potential Project, and so are Unilever. And he said, now is the time for us to master our inner game so that we can access our best outer game. And that is, of course, so true. Okay. So I'll pause just for a moment, just in case anybody's got something they want to say about this. No. And again, be brave, manage your natural tendency to worry about saying something silly or withholding stuff that you want to say. Please do feel free to share and treat it as a practice. Excuse me, got a little bit of a cough. So again, more on the business case, you can also look at it in terms of a couple of lenses. So the first lens in terms of why do we need a coaching culture today, particularly today, is that we are in the middle of profound, accelerating and simultaneous, we call it systemic shift. This is stuff that's happening outside us. Economic and business factors, competition, governance, regulatory issues and matters, all of these things are all changing, as are demographic factors, the mobility of people, the aging workforces in so many places in the world. In the mainland, the normal sort of pyramid of age, where has actually almost inverted, and now I think there are more people above 50 than any other particular demographic in the country of China. And these obviously do impact on things. Social and cultural factors, things that were maybe almost normal behavior, say 30 or maybe even just 20 years ago, are now often regarded as inappropriate and sometimes even illegal. So we have all sorts of social and cultural movements and factors that are inputting. to this. We also have political movements and political factors that are causing things that we have to think about. Technological change, of course, that is a huge one. You know, we're now being more and more dominated by what we tend to call weapons of mass distraction. These things, smartphones, which unfortunately cause us sometimes to behave not very smart. At least we keep getting distracted by them. And then finally, natural and environmental factors. Pandemics, earthquakes, climate change, you know, it's all coming at us all at the same time, simultaneously, and in a way that is actually accelerating. And we have a word that we've kind of coined for this, and we call it complexification. Put a note into the comment if you actually, if you believe that the world is becoming more complicated. Just put a note of affirmation that you agree that this is, or not, that you agree that this is absolutely the case. The world is getting more complicated. Complexification causes an internal experience for us, which is known, which we call the paid reality. And our assertion around the paid reality, and by the way, this comes from the Potential Project, actually, this phrase, our assertion around the paid reality is that you don't want to be paid. So before you all hang up, we just define paid a little bit differently. It's a world of increasing pressure that we're really facing really just over the past 10 years. We're being asked to do more and more and more with less human capital, less financial capital, less resources, and also less attentional capital. At the same time, we, possibly because of these things, are being required to be always on, which creates a sense of being action addicted. So we always feel that we need to be doing something, busy, and we don't have time for reflection. At the same time, we have an unlimited number of places in any moment where we could put our attention. So information overload. So how are we actually making choices about where that attention is actually going? And that's why I say that we seem always to be, our attention seems to be under siege. So much information, so much to do with our attention. How are we making choices? And all of this leads to a sense of distraction, continuously being distracted from that which is perhaps the most important for us. And that creates distress, sense of psychological distress. So what we know is that this really requires us to be adaptive. So what do we mean by adaptive? Anybody out there like to offer, either in the chat or through turning on your microphone, an answer to the question, what do we mean by the word adaptive? What do you think we mean? Any thoughts? It'd be lovely if somebody would be happy to share. No? Okay. Ajit, was that you?
Hi, Tony. It's Anna here.
Sorry, who is it?
Anna.
Hi.
How are you? Well, adaptive is adaptation, right? So it's at least the way I understand it. Things are changing and have changed a lot in the last 12 months or more, and so we need to. People are talking about new normal or new reality or whatever it is, but wherever the change comes from, you know, it can be AI, it can be the pandemic or other things. We have to deal with it. You know, it's not easy, but we have to deal with it. And this is, you know, being adaptive. That realize that things are not as they were and are not going back. And we have to, we have to realize that and do with it. You know, we can't you just make things go away like they are now.
Thank you. That's absolutely right. That it's being adaptive really means that we are, if you wish, philosophers use the word comporting ourselves or shaping ourselves to fit in with what is actually necessary today. and rather than remaining rigid. And many of us, that's what we try to do. We try to maintain our existing shape, even though the shape of everything around us is actually changing. And so we perhaps end up maybe being a round peg that is actually not fitting into a square hole, or vice versa. And what we actually mean by it is that being adaptive fundamentally means that we are able to see things as they really are, with, as far as we can, a completely open or beginner's-minded curiosity, noticing our reactions in the moment and bringing what is really called for into that moment for the long-term benefit of our systems of stakeholders. And that's, unfortunately, in the paid reality, where we have to, there's so much stuff that's just coming at us. What happens is the mind is automatically reacting to things that are coming to us. And normally the thing that first comes into our minds, and that first comes into the emotional field, may not be best for us, for the system of us in a particular moment. And so the ability to see what's happening outside and see how our mind is engaging with that, and then just say, oh, okay, I can see what you're saying to me, mind, but what needs to happen here is this, right? So it's more that. So what is it that is getting in the way of us being able to adapt to the circumstances of what we're calling the paid reality? And there's a lot of things, that are there. And before we go into it, I just want to say this: that the default human condition doesn't really set us up for being effective in the modern professional and interpersonal world in which we live. All this pressure that we've spoken about earlier causes the mind to create stories. It's all very, very difficult because our evolutionary legacy causes us to see change as a threat. So if you imagine 50,000 years ago, when we're sort of walking around in the savannah, any change in our external world was likely to represent a genuine existential threat to us. Today, probably not so much, but we do use this beautiful thing called the human mind to make up threats, to replace those genuinely existential threats. Today, most of these threats are threats to our egos rather than threats to our bodies, but they feel the same and they drive similar emotions and then similar reactions, right? And this causes the average mind to want to feel the need to do a second job that nobody is paying us for. And it kind of looks a little bit like this: the job of covering up our weaknesses, the job of managing our impressions in front of other people, the job of looking good, which perhaps is a subset of the same thing, the job of hiding our uncertainties, hiding our weaknesses, hiding our limitations, hiding our inadequacies, hiding. And here's a sort of a slightly more expansive list of some of the things, and it will be different for each of us, that comprise this kind of second job that we're doing all the time, often in background mode. Interfering behaviors. These are the, if you wish, the limiting beliefs that many of us carry. I must never look stupid. I must never be wrong. I must never feel rejected. I must never look weak or ineffective. I must always look good. All of these stories that we carry around with ourselves that drive, and we actually call them drivers, they drive behaviors that we certainly don't get paid for. So a coaching culture is one that can make it safe for people to be able to see that the dreaded outcomes that they're predicting, that these stories on the left of this slide are protecting us from, are likely to be untrue and are in fact dangerous to our well-being and our professional success. And that these assumptions have been installed maybe into us in our distant past, designed to keep us safe, but nonetheless serving no purpose today. And that's easier said than done, to be able to see, to help people to see these storylines running and to be able to unpick them so that they can actually be adaptive to what's happening today. Because people are going to make mistakes. People are sometimes going to do things that are wrong, and we need them to see that they're probably still going to be breathing afterwards. Okay, so there's that. So just apart from that, we're also seeing that people's motivations are changing. So we've got the external phenomena, and now we've got a bunch of stuff that's going on actually within the motivations of people. So while the first lens was all about complexification, which is the idea that, that the overwhelm and the distress that we face, if we're not careful, undermines our adaptability and strips us of our creative and collaborative resources, just at the times when we need to be at our most creative and most collaborative, i.e. when facing stress and overwhelm, which of course is a factor of the modern life. The second lens relates more to the changes which are becoming apparent in the motivations of the modern human. In older, or maybe not such older times, it was all about payoffs to what we call the economic person. More money, more power, more holidays, perhaps shorter working hours, or maybe at lower levels, probably just trying to survive, getting some money so that we can survive. And Rasmus Højgaard, CEO of Potential Project, calls this empty stomach leadership, leading on the assumption that people have no choice but to be with your company and doing the things that you're telling them to do. Well, it's not like that today. People are now motivated and inspired by different concerns. Their stomachs are no longer empty. So basic needs fulfillment and the fear that's associated with that is less important for many of us today, especially younger people. They're more comfortable in their ability to survive and are looking at different ways of flourishing. And these are some of the things that they are concerned about. Meaningfulness, fulfillment. They want to be engaged in activity that serves something bigger than us, bigger than themselves. And that's, of course, related to engagement and flow. A sense of connection and community is becoming important. Will I be around people that I feel that I can fit in with? Can I be part of this tribe? It's a very, very important concern of people today now as they're joining companies. There's this thing, called it here, beneficence and non-maleficence. Am I joining a company that is causing harm in the world? Or am I joining a company that actually has some benefit in the world? So things like environmental sustainability, et cetera, are part of this. Are we doing good in the world? People are concerned about this today. Values. Does this company help me to show up the way that I would love to show up in my life? Can my work empower me to be able to express my values to the best of my ability? And this is all in service of, it's almost a big question. Does joining this company or being with this company help me to flourish? Does it help me to flourish? So these are the questions that we need to be asking ourselves about whether we're delivering these things to our members or our constituents. Don't like to use the word employees, although sometimes I will slip into this language, but it's actually better if we're going to have a deliberately developmental culture to use words other than employees, because employee seems diminutive, and we need to find another way of describing people. So we've spoken about some of the conditions in the world that create the business case for the coaching culture. So now let's talk a little bit about what is a coaching culture. And then we'll give you some sort of high-level ideas about the things that we need to do in order to get it. And let me just check in with time. We've had half an hour. Yeah, we're okay, I think. Any thoughts? Anyone like to give their definition of what a coaching culture means to them? Anyone? What's a coaching culture? No. All right, I'll give you an offer then on it in that case, just in service of moving along. So we've got a definition of coaching culture, and we call it an I, 4 E's and an I. 4 E's and an I. So in a nutshell, it's a culture that inspires, encourages, enables, empowers, and engages its people so that they can bring their best to their work. We could actually extend that and actually say to their work and also to their life, because, you know, more and more we realize that we can't really separate work and life today. It's just two sides of the same coin. And then all of that being in service of the individual and organizational flourishing. So then we have to look at, well, what do we mean by flourishing? And just quickly, by the word flourishing, what we mean by that is this. It's not quite a standard definition, but it's one that's really worth remembering if we would like to have an organization that is adapting to the needs of the modern world. The feelings that arise when we know that we're doing our best, even in the midst of difficulty, that we're engaging in meaningful pursuit, and being able to bring more of our real selves into our lives. So most of us, we're not really bringing our real selves into much of our lives. And the reason why is because all of these stories that I mentioned earlier on, that we are running about what we need to happen in our lives in order to be happy, they're really on the surface. And what they're doing is they're obscuring the real person that is actually underneath all of these stories. And we call this our potential. So these storylines obscure our ability to bring our full potential into our lives and, of course, into our work. Right, so there's that. And it turns out that when we are able to bring our best to situations that are difficult for us, then feelings of genuine, we call it genuine happiness, arise within us. So one example that we could think of here might be that if we're simply able, if we've established a developmental goal that we would like to become more patient and manage anger, you know, when we're triggered. And then if we're simply able to manage our anger in a meeting when we are triggered and able to bring a sense of maybe inquiry, kindness, and understanding to that difficult moment in the midst of the emotion, then we're going to feel great despite what we get in return. We may get what we want or we may not. There's actually a better chance that we will, but even if we don't, we're actually in fact likely to feel better. So the language of I just want to show this last thing. But of course, all of this flourishing tends to also, we flourish when we know that this is all in service of both our own and also others' growth and well-being. So the language of a modern coaching culture organization includes language like this. I know it's going to be challenging, but it will be rewarding. I know that I'm going to have every support to meet and beat my perceived limitations. That we will recognize your humanity, which means knowing that we are humans and being a human is hard, and we have all kinds of emotions and we have all kinds of false limitations that, because of the stories we're telling ourselves. We recognize your humanity and we will help you to build the competence to adapt to this profoundly changing world, both within and outside your work. Or we will help you to change so that you can accomplish much more and build a sense of meaning through your personal growth. So this is the language that you will hear within a deliberately developmental organization, otherwise known as a modern coaching culture. All right. So I'll just pause. Any questions on anything so far? I've seen one comment in chat from Begum, talking about adaptability, I think, being about how fast we understand, digest, and respond to changing factors, which I think is spot on. So thank you for that, Begum. Would anyone like to offer any questions, any comments, any objections, anything so far? Okay, moving along then. So a lot of research that we've done quite a lot of research on this, and it sort of points towards the overall outcome, if you wish, of modern coaching culture. And these are quite traditional. So we know that generally, and this isn't necessarily for 100% everybody, but as a rule, more and more companies really do need in the modern world to implement a coaching culture, or they would do much better if they did. Not necessarily tomorrow, but certainly in the sustainable long term. So modern coaching culture fosters development towards a stronger sustainable business performance, not just tomorrow, but in the longer term. Okay. It increased engagement of people. So if you're in HR, you'll know that this is a big deal. And the ability to be adaptive to change. So those are the, if you wish, the high level, top level outcomes of being able to move towards having a deliberately coaching culture. So what's the starting point for this? And we say, you know, in the modern world, that, you know, if you, firstly, you can't be, the expression we use, you may have heard of, is you can't be half pregnant. If you're going to do this, you need to do it right. You need to take a long-term view, and you need to work with the right starting points. Otherwise, you can't really step into this space of helping yourselves and your people to be adaptive to the paid reality. And this is a survival issue for companies. It really is. It's not really a choice. Many companies are going to just need to do this. And it really starts with the beginning. Building a modern coaching culture requires a compass that an individual can refer to again and again and again every time they're going off track, every time they're having individual emotions that are taking them away from being skillful in the moment of choice. It's a bit like family values. And the first, we need to form a tribe. And in order to have a tribe, we need to form a very, very strong reason why a person should be a member of that tribe. And the first step is to have a vision. So a vision is really the answer to the question, as a company, why are we alive? It's very, very aspirational. It's very big picture. What will be different in a world where we, and maybe perhaps others together with us, achieve our missions that serve our purpose? So, for example, it might be something like, we see a world where individuals are finding the causes and conditions for their genuine flourishing. That's actually our vision, or part of our vision. We see a world where individuals are able to find the causes and conditions for their genuine flourishing. Or we see a world, it's also part of our vision, where organizations are more productive and profitable while providing meaningful work for their people in service of their flourishing. So that's a vision. So underneath that, it's good to have a purpose, which is our organization's part of that vision. So we exist to help organizations and individuals flourish through their ability to bring their best to profoundly difficult and changing times. Might be an organizational purpose. It's how they fit in with the vision of creating a better world. So that's the organization's purpose. And then under that is the mission. So the mission, and by the way, these phrases are so often misunderstood. The mission is the territory that needs to be taken and held that serves the purpose. And it actually, armies have missions. It actually comes from the military, to occupy this hill or this island or this territory or whatever. So the mission are the things that we need to do. So many companies have such things as we aim to be the #1 in providing X, Y, and Z solutions in A, B, and C territories. So there's your mission. And then underneath that are our values. So values are how we need to work with each other and our various stakeholders in order to accomplish the mission, which of course is in line with the purpose. What we agree to care most about so that we can accomplish, it should be the word accomplish in there. So this is an agreement between people about how we accomplish the mission, how we are to transcend, I love that word transcend, how we are to transcend our individual agendas with an eye on how we are aligned to our shared purpose. What is it that we can collectively agree that we are going to care most about? And how are we going to remember this moment by moment? This gives us our best shot of achieving the mission that serves our purpose so that we can do our part to create the vision. And then underneath all of this, of course, we have the people. And the people, of course, includes our teams. What is the shared purpose of the team that serves the organizational purpose and its missions? What are the values that guide how the team works together, the team values, so that we can better accomplish, our purpose? And what behaviors do we demonstrate in order that we're able to show alignment with these values? And then what are the organizational and individual practices that we help people to do that help us to remember? And this is where the rubber really meets the road, the practices that help us to continuously embody our collective values, the processes by which we create the alignment, and the processes by which we create an ongoing commitment to our collective growth so that we can better embody the values that we align to. For most of us, there needs to be development and growth so that we can continuously live inside our values. Because sometimes things come up in the emotional field that take us away in the moment from those things that we care most about. So just to finish off on this piece, just remember this. Great companies don't just create sexy statements of values and purpose and mission, and then create the values and behaviors that enforce these. What great companies and great leaders are doing is that they're finding a way to put words into the visions and purposes that are already in the hearts and minds of their communities, including their prospective communities and also employees. And once you've managed to articulate a vision that is all, a purpose and a vision that's already out there in the world and is carried by many people, even though they may not yet know it. Once this is done, the rest is simply about helping people to grow fully into then the embodiment of their own sense of purpose. Okay. So that's that. So it starts at the starting point. If you really want to do this right, many organizations, I've looked at a lot of organizations' mission, vision, and purpose, and I throw my hands up in my air and say, how on earth is this going to sit in the hearts and minds of your people, moment by moment? How is it going to be remembered just when it needs to be remembered, which is just at the point when a person is most stressed and they're most likely to be able to want to behave in a way that is not in line with these things. Okay. Comments? Questions? Chats? All right. So moving along, what does it look like? So I'm going to borrow here from the groundbreaking work of Robert Kegan and Lahey in this area from Harvard. And they've done a huge amount of research in this. And what they say is that modern organizations need to be deliberately developmental. And this maps very well indeed into what we describe as a modern coaching culture. And such an organization can be looked at through 3 dimensions at the very, very high level. And these 3 dimensions happen to be the same as our spatial dimensions of depth, breadth, and height. So what is meant by depth is really, and starting with this relates to alignment across stakeholder groups, all the different stakeholder groups. And actually, I just want to go back and just talk about what we mean by the differing stakeholder groups. So here's a few of them. Right? Employees, shareholders, regulators, investors, customers, communities, partners, and suppliers, and and many others. And I'm really not going to go into this slide, but just remembering that modern adaptive teams are co-creating beneficial value with and for all of these key stakeholder groups that improve organizational outcomes, quality of life, diversity, well-being, and all sustainably within the various different systemic levels that our organization is living and breathing within. And we have no choice but to be cognizant of all of this if we're going to survive today. Okay, so that's what we mean by that. And so just coming back to this, so what we mean when we're talking about stakeholder groups, we need to include everybody when we're doing our team plans, everybody that might be served by our purpose. Okay. So this is alignment across stakeholder groups to this kind of outside-in view. And it's a knowing what development really leads to, or that, sorry, not what, but that development really leads to the business outcomes that we're looking for, our OKRs, our KPIs, or however it is that we're describing the business outcomes that we're looking for. It is about understanding the needs of all stakeholders and then doing something with that understanding. It requires alignment and commitment to development across all of these stakeholder groups, especially in terms of how we communicate with them. And then when that alignment is secured through all stakeholder groups, that everybody understands that it's difficult to be human and that we need to grow, then what we've done is we've created what we call a home, which is our developmental community. The idea of the home is that for most of us who are breathing, being, as I said a couple of times already, it's just hard being a human because of our self-awareness and the unique ability that our human mind has to pay attention to stuff other than what is happening right here, right now, through all of these what-if predictions that we're making all the time. It's interesting, just, what is it? I think his name is Robert Killingsworth at Harvard. In 2010, he actually wrote a paper that basically said, the conclusion was, the human mind is a wandering mind. The ability to think about what is happening now is a cognitive achievement that comes at a significant cost to our emotional well-being and also to our professional success. And yet, because of the way the modern world is showing up, we are continuously doing that. We're getting taken off track of what is actually useful by our wandering mind. So in order to grow through these external and internal challenges, we need to be held. And this requires a kind of trust that arises when we know that we're all in it together. And that's where this whole idea of a sense of shared purpose is coming in, that we have a shared understanding of the difficulties of the human condition. So being supported through this vulnerability is about moving from coping with it to thriving in the midst of it. And I just want to kind of share another slide around holding vulnerability. What is really necessary for us to be able to grow through the difficulties that these storylines are creating for us? And I just want to read something out from a lady called Diana Fosha. And Diana Fosha was the founder, or is the founder, of a psychotherapeutic technique called Accelerated Experiential Dynamic Psychotherapy, AEDP. I'm not quite sure that it needs such a complicated name for such a simple and patently obvious truth, that being a human is hard, and that in the middle of all of that hardness, the roots of resilience and our capacity to withstand emotionally difficult situations without resorting to defensiveness is to be found in the felt sense of being understood by and existing in the mind and the heart of a loving, attuned, and self-possessed other person. You might think that that sounds patently weird, but at the same time, if we really want to grow and help others to grow, and if we really want to give ourselves in the modern world the most reliable shot at profound professional success and happiness, then we need to begin to be this kind of person and encourage others to be the same. Because this is the only reliable strategy to meet the modern world the way it is. And if you're a bit spooked, as some people often are, by the word loving, all it really means is compassionate, kind, and understanding. Okay. So if people are going to be willing to be vulnerable and to grow, then they need this kind of supportive community and through in and through that vulnerability. So this is about encouraging an environment where everybody in the company, particularly in the more leadership levels, they get that. And when they wake up in the morning, the most important thing that they know they have to work on is themselves. It's challenging, it's difficult, but a coaching culture is fostering that mindset. How does it do that? So a coaching culture implies that people are deeply valued as human beings so that they can be held and then constantly held accountable for their performance and their growth, and also for their work, for theirs and others' learning and well-being. And so what does this thing about kin recognition actually mean? So the word kin is clearly related to family, and it turns out that we are, checking one time, we are hardwired to see each other as either being in or out of our tribe. And it's called in-out bias that runs very, very strong with nearly all of us. Sometimes it's called us and them bias. And this is another part of our evolutionary legacy. And if we see others as us, then we are more empathic, we're more understanding, and we're more compassionate. Just as if family, when we see people as part of our tribe, whereas thems are seen with suspicion and hostility. So this is the legacy of our tribal beginnings. So how do we install the idea that others are actually in the tribe? Well, it's a choice that we can make. We can choose to see others as being just like me by doing various different kinds of commonalities practices that we're not going to go into here, but can certainly help. And also making sure that people are regularly reminded of our shared vision and our shared purpose. And this leads to trustworthiness, and it leads to our ability to build strong communities. I say trustworthiness, it really means trust. When we are all aligned under a collective purpose, when we're all in it together, then there is a sense of trust that arises within that group. Just like maybe people that follow a football team or belong to a certain family or a certain church group or whatever it might be, all in that way bound together through a sense of community. So once a person is seen as being in the tribe, then suddenly vulnerability is okay. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to express vulnerability. It's more likely that others can be comfortable in discomfort as they are more likely to feel held. So that's that. So what then happens? What trust is it that we're trusting here? The kind of trust that others will not be disrespected, cudgeled, or cancelled because they are sharing their developmental edge and helping and asking others to help them to work with that edge. That does require a sense of kinship. Okay, so building a sense of kinship is the first component I want to talk about there. We need our teams, we need to be team literate. We need to create team norms. We need to create team values, which are really mental rehearsals of the things that might go wrong between us and how we are going to deal with them. Such questions as, how are you going to work with me when you notice that I'm in a bad mood? Because being in a bad mood is human. It's going to happen from time to time. It doesn't mean that I think you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that I'm not committed to helping you. It just means that it maybe I'm not in a good mood. Underneath all of that, I'm still the same person that I was yesterday. How are we going to help each other work with this humanity? We do that by creating norms. Modern coaching cultures also know that rank doesn't come with its normal privileges. Have any of you ever noticed that the higher you climb the ladder, the more that you are deferred to, maybe the funnier your jokes get, the more you are listened to, etc., etc., etc. You may not have such privilege in a deliberately developmental or modern coaching culture. Everybody, it's more of a meritocracy. So modern coaching cultural organizations do have hierarchies. They do have people that report to people, but the main issue is that higher rank doesn't automatically get you off having the merits of your ideas respectfully and kindly questioned if they seem not to be in service of organizational flourishing. So this is moving towards meritocracy rather than the use of positional power, and it is essential in order to create adaptive organizations today. And many leaders find this really hard. But this is what is required if we're going to enable growth and allow others to fully express their potential. So again, it doesn't mean that senior people can't make decisions or decide. But what it does mean is that it is allowed to ask questions or even respectively challenge the thinking of others, including the leadership. And it is uncomfortable all around. It's uncomfortable for people to know that they are required to challenge their leadership. And it's certainly uncomfortable for the leaders that are being challenged. So our growth edge is often about how are we dealing with that discomfort? Because that is part of what is needed today. And it is part of, therefore, how we need to change and therefore adapt to the needs of the modern world. Okay. Right. So just if any of you are leaders, and if you find it impertinent or offensive that others might tell you, perhaps to your face, even in front of others, that they don't agree with the way that you're doing something, or that you are disempowering others by doing something in a certain way, then you're going to find yourself being offended a lot in an organization that has a deliberately coaching culture. This impacts on the organization. If you're getting offended, you're not helping to create a safe home in which is a crucible for others' development. Doesn't mean you need to agree with everything that's being said or even that you must change your ways, but it does mean that you need to see the opportunity and reflect and learn from it. Is there any truth here or not? Right, so these are the things we need to consider. So the leader's role is more about steering. So just finally, the leader's role. There we go. The leader's role is more about steering the organization to be sure that the organization has the policies of a modern coaching culture enacted, to be tolerant that also in the short term, many may feel uncomfortable with it. And again, as I told you, you can't be half pregnant. You need to make a leap of trust to be able to do this. And it can't happen overnight. It's a process that can take 2 to 3 years to play its way fully out. Okay, so that's lens 1. And where are we? Okay, I'm going to go on probably for just about another 10 or 15 minutes maximum, and then I'm going to stop and we're going to just throw it open for questions. And we've got a couple of questions coming in. Begum said he had to leave for a meeting. That's great. Okay, so the next is the height. So the height. So this is really about the loftiness of our intentions and aspirations to create this collectively developmental culture. And what it is, the components of this are about moving from a fixed towards a growth mindset, which is just a knowing that adults can and do grow. It is possible to change and to help others change so that they can adopt a more useful approach to those things that currently may be the most challenging for them. Often, some of those stories I mentioned earlier on. Their attitude to failure, their response to feedback, their approach to personal and professional challenges or change. So just as an example, some questions that you might ask yourself are this: how does your organization and its teams, help you to identify your personal challenges? How does your organization help you to surface those in a surrounding environment of compassion that we call the holding environment? How are others enrolled and enlisted to assist individuals with this growth? In teams, how are the members of the team held collectively accountable for not only their performance, but also for their growth and for their learning? Who else cares that an individual grows? What support is given to help you and others grow in ways that growth is actually needed, which is more the internal world? How do you experience your work on this growth on a daily or an ongoing basis? Do you have practices that your company helps you with? How often are they happening? And how is success with these growth areas recognized and rewarded and celebrated within your company? A very, very important part of it. We need to learn not only to celebrate the results that somebody gets, but also the effort that they're making on their personal and professional growth. And we need to recognize that in some way. How are you rewarded or given feedback on your efforts, approach to difficulties rather than just only on your results? So that's what we talk about in terms of growth versus fixed mindset. A modern coaching culture knows that weakness is in fact an asset. It is seen as an opportunity, and so are mistakes, seen as an opportunity to notice how we can do better. Errors are an opportunity to learn. So shame, blame, and guilt, which is what ordinary companies do, leads to stress, leads to defensiveness. And the problem with stress and defensiveness is that it inhibits learning, it inhibits creativity, it inhibits collaboration. Stress that guilt and shame causes us to go deeper into our old reactive patterns. And this is not the province of a coaching culture. This kind of ordinary organizational behavior reinforces the likelihood that we spend more of our mental energy managing others' perceptions of us than we do managing the opportunities and responsibilities of our work. So we've got to move away from that. Okay. So what else? Knowing that emotions are not naughty. They provide valuable cues and valuable information that can be used in service of our growth. And they tell us and others what it is that we actually really care about and what we might need, therefore, to actually work on. Sometimes we call it our stuff. We need to help people to work with their emotions, because otherwise they're going to get triggered and they're going to start doing stuff that we all do when we get triggered. Take care of ourselves by going into fight, flight mode, and certainly stop listening to others. So what does your organization do to help you to manage your own and others' emotions in service of dialogue towards our collective purpose, our collective interests? And this goes well beyond classic emotional intelligence training. It's about being able to make wise and skillful choices in the midst of our normal human emotions, so that we can inquire for ourselves and for others about the opportunity for development. So that's that. Modern coaching culture, in terms of the developmental edge, it's run on deliberately developmental principles. A coaching culture mindset might include, as a matter of policy, that it is okay to make mistakes, but it is not okay not to own those mistakes and to be prepared to talk about them openly, and then to talk about what might need to be worked on so that that mistake doesn't continuously recur. Of course, we need to build that home, that trusted home, so that individuals are in any, and we need to trust also that individuals are doing the best that they can in any moment. If people are genuinely lazy or genuinely incompetent, then of course maybe they might need to go. But this is often not the case. So the focus here is on the how rather than only the what. How do we regulate our conduct? How do we work with our emotions and aversions? How do we build our organizations? How do we deal with people who do not embody our values? And we're doing all of this all because we believe that these are the things that suit our mission. And by the way, that mission can also include missions related to profit and other material matters. And then related to the above, it's not a case of either or. There's no need to make choices between the bottom line and the embodiment of all of the things that are necessary to have a modern coaching culture. Having a modern coaching culture implies that it has already been determined that such a culture is what is actually needed to create superb and sustainable long-term business performance, however the company should choose to measure that. All right. So now we're going to talk about breadth and groove. So breadth is really about, let me just go back to that last slide. It's about the nature of an organization's development practices and how they fit in with the business demands of the company. And groove obviously is about, the things that are actually happening. So about the groove in terms of the practices that might actually be happening around development, the first thing is to know that it all starts with the mind. It all starts with the interior world. All behavior starts with a set of thoughts and feelings that lead to impulses, choices, and then actions. And as we said before, these immediate thoughts and feelings and then impulses, and therefore sadly actions, are often based on internal fake news, assertions, inferences, assumptions, and what if routines that all occur somewhat automatically, related to the dreaded outcomes that we described earlier on. And again, it's just a reminder of what they are, but I want you to just put this up again and say this about it. We're trying to help individuals to deal with this very human reality. And what we have is a predicting mind that creates fake news. So how are we helping people to see all of this stuff for what it really is, to see things as they actually are? What practices are we doing ourselves as leaders to develop the competency of seeing things as they actually are? The bottom line here is that we need to help ourselves and others be skeptical of what is the first thing that comes into the mind and into our emotional field. What are those immediate reactions that are taking us away from being continuously connected to our sense of kinship, to being all in it together, and our sense of alignment to our shared values and purpose? So the ability to know what's happening in the mind and to bring our attention back to our goals, especially our developmental goals, and then asking the question, what is my practice now? What am I working on and how can I practice it now? This is about noticing and adjusting, which is a function, of course, of mindfulness. And that's a huge topic on its own. And for those who want to learn how to notice and adjust, if you want to know more about, we have a myriad of different programs that can help you to build the neurological infrastructure that supports your ability to keep your mind on the prize. And for many of us, that actually does require some work. The other thing about practices is practices need to be oriented to what we say here is minding the gaps. Remembering again the ways that we might get in our own way of our own success, and in terms of the way that we hide. So we create kind of gaps. We allow gaps to form between us and others, which inhibit the flow of necessary information. We allow gaps to form between our plans and our actions in the moment of choice, as our attention gets hijacked by all of these fears and anxieties that were described in that last slide. What we need to do instead is somehow help people to remain aligned to this sense of shared vision for the execution of any particular project or task or things that we're doing inside our teams. So the way we do it in a modern coaching culture is that we have a process that ensures that we contract with each other regularly to remind each other of how we're going to show up with each other along the way. How are we going to hold ourselves and each other accountable for our performance, our learning, our growth, and our well-being? How are we going to work with our challenges, our uncertainties, our emotions, and conflict that is going to arise along the way. And this often requires a regular recontracting when anybody in the team notices that things are going off track. And it could be and should be anybody that is allowed to notice and then call out to the team that things might be going off track. Or even just ask the question, are we on track here? Is what we're doing here aligned with our shared purpose? Right. But recognizing as we do that, that we're human. And just because people do go off track, it doesn't mean that others don't care or even that they're incompetent. It just means that there is an opportunity to recommit to our shared purpose and our shared values. And this is real work, and it's really hard work. But the results of this work are more sustainable business outcomes. Different courses require different horses, and we're certainly on a different course today than the course that we were on, say, 15 or even 10 years ago. Different challenges need different solutions. I'm just going to quickly show you this slide about some of the gaps that we need to help people to be concerned with. And I'm not going to go through it in detail. And just know this, by the way, if you want to have these slides, then all we would like you to do is to send us an email and ask for them. We do want you to do a little bit of work, which is get onto your computer, find our email address, which we'll share with you later on, ask us for the deck, and then we'll be very happy to share the deck with you. And of course, we'll be very happy to engage with you further to go into any of these things in more detail. All right, so just finally, keep your eye on the prize. So what does that even mean? Keep your eye on the prize. So what it really means is look to the long term rather than the short term. Keep asking yourself this question. If I have a goal, for example, that if I have a goal that I have a team maybe that can be empowered, inspired, so that 6 months from now I can delegate more, so that I can keep my attention on the things that only I can do in the moment. But then I'm saying, well, hold on a minute, let me do this myself because it's easier and I can't be bothered to explain it to you. Then I'm avoiding immediate, perhaps short-term pain, but at the expense of the opportunity to properly empower and then develop my team. Or if I indulge in complaining and blaming because it makes me feel better now, then it denies me and my people the deliberately developmental opportunity of doing a proper root cause analysis with kindness and compassion in service of our future growth. And even worse, that behavior creates an environment of distrust, which sets back our wish to have a culture that supports IEEE. So the idea of keeping the eye on the primary goal and practice with the immediate discomfort that doing this brings up. Okay, that's what we really mean by that. All right, now I'm just going to put out a little model. We're not going to go through it. We wouldn't. It's not because we're running out of time. It wasn't planned to go through this model. But here is a model that you can use to really work out what sort of practices you need under various different domains, and it's called the Peril model. And these are the things that we need to be concerned about. If we want to have a high-performing and high-value creating team, otherwise known as a deliberately developmental or coaching culture, then we need to understand our purpose and motivation. We need to understand the organizational purposes, the organizational motivations, and how our teams actually fit into that. And we need to be doing that in the context of what is our purpose in terms of our various different stakeholder groups. Okay. We need to know, obviously, what are our externally facing processes and systems. We need to understand about what relationships are necessary in order for that to happen. We need to obviously do work on our internal processes and systems and on our learning processes. And here's a sort of a diagnostic questionnaire that we can help you do. That kind of helps you to map this out. And the stuff that's in red down at the bottom there are answers where these are actually real answers from a company in the bottom left here that wasn't doing things well, and answers on the top in green from companies that were doing things well. So this is a matrix that you can use as a diagnostic to kind of see how you're getting on with these things. So just as an example, mapping purpose, values, and motivations here with externally facing processes, then certain stakeholder groups were unclear about what this team is all about. And it turned out that they were also unclear about how what this team was doing fits in with their needs as stakeholders, their particular needs. Relationships, purpose, values, and motivations were ignored, and people were pursuing their own agendas rather than organizational or team agendas, and there was uncontained conflict in the team. Whereas if you look up here on the right, there was a company where the team leader and the stakeholders were saying that the teams are working enthusiastically towards shared goals and conflicts are resolved with values in mind. So there is just a diagnostic that you can use. Finishing with a summary. And here it goes. At the end of it, this is the summary of it all. Start with building a strong, authentic, and engaging vision, purpose, mission, and value statements, both for the organization and for the team. Work to drive the concept of flourishing internally. Human flourishing actually means business flourishing. If your people flourish, your business will flourish. This is a given in the modern world, or perhaps it's a given that if your people are not flourishing, your business cannot flourish. For your teams, discover a strong team purpose, which is the team's compass that they can refer to again and again despite problems. Create growth-focused principles, policies, and norms. That's what we call the edge. Implement growth-focused practices on the ground for the people, for the individuals. Of course, it could include coaching, but it's more than just coaching. All in the context of a growth-focused home or compassionate community, because this development is hard to do. Ensure all of your processes support this, including recruitment, performance management, compensation frameworks. Make sure that everything is supporting the principles that we set out. And be prepared for some attrition along the way, because some people won't like it. You'll get some people who basically will say, no, I don't want to face my vulnerabilities. And they might have to go, because if they go, or you might get people who say, well, why should I do this? Look at how much I'm billing. Look at how good is my performance. You're not having to make choices. The choices are simple. You maintain your developmental organization, and you need that trust. And be prepared for a couple of years of process here. It'll be difficult along the way, but if you keep your collective eyes on the prize, you'll get there. All right, so I'm going to stop. We got 10 minutes. I'll just leave this slide up while we do some Q&A.
Yeah, Tony, thank you for that. I also included a very quick survey here that if you can put that slide up with the QR code. This is just for us to get feedback. You know, we're planning on doing these webinars, exclusive webinars every quarter. So it would be good to get your feedback. How can we improve, or what other topics would you like us to cover in the rest of the year? So thank you so much for that. Okay. And then in the meantime, as some people are filling the survey, and I included the URL in the chat, also our email is here. Feel free to email us anytime. But we're still here, Tony and I, for the next 15 minutes or so, if you have any questions that you'd like to discuss.
Is there anything that's coming up for anybody? It's a really, really big topic. And we're trying to provoke thinking here. Because it is an emerging field, actually. I do remember, if you want to get the slides, all you have to do is
Tony, I have a question.
Yes.
How do you manage or apply the coaching culture in situations where, even if you're doing everything that you have proposed in this webinar, you still have situations that have to do with internal politics, because, you know, in spite of it all, you have a boss and you have bosses' bosses, you have a hierarchy, and there's competition to go up the ladder, you know. So there are situations where all of this will be put aside for the in brackets, not in brackets, in how do you put, yeah, in the for the benefit of my career, right? So how do you propose to deal with that?
Well, for me, it would be very simple, and yet it's not simple, because people do not want to keep their eye on the long-term prize. They tend to get hijacked into short-term concerns. You know, immediate pleasure, quarterly numbers, you know, are part of that. And what we need to facilitate when this type of thing looks like a choice is, because if there's politics in an organization, then what that normally means is either that there is a personal agenda, it might mean that, or it might mean that a particular stakeholder group is working on a different agenda. And what we say is that hidden agendas are unacceptable in a modern coaching culture, because having hidden non-transparent agendas is non-developmental. It can't be. And so if we allow that to persist in a company, we're going to potentially derail their ability to have long-term, better and more sustainable business results. Yeah, tolerating it might get you better results tomorrow, but we're looking about how to maximize the area under the curve of long-term results over time when we are implementing a modern coaching culture. And we can't say, you know, we can't say that politics is unacceptable, because it's always there, but it doesn't have to be negative. And all we have to do is to allow people to put their agendas on the table. If they want to get promoted, that's fine, but it cannot be that a person generates emotions around that goal that are undermining the need to build that home, being that this is non-negotiable. And I've seen it, you know, working with some banks recently, actually, where the banks are actually, some of the banks are beginning to make difficult choices where you have a top performing person who is leaving a trail of dead bodies around them because of the way that they're actually showing up, undermining the whole trust in the organization, because obviously it's creating gossip, it's creating the talk that, well, the organization says all of these things, but they allow this person to do that. They fired a person recently, I won't tell you who it was, that was a top performer because they were unwilling to embody the shared values of the organization. And they insist on people that stay signing up to it, they commit to it, they contract around it, they get compensated for it. And if they don't comply over time, they will be, of course, the company will try to develop them to be able to see why they should, for the benefit of themselves and for others. But if it doesn't happen, then they will have to go. Arnie, was that you, by the way, that asked that question? It sounded like your voice.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for your question. Did it satisfy? It's difficult. It's not easy.
Yeah. No, I understand. I understand the reply. It's
But are we gonna be a deliberately developmental culture? Or are we gonna be an ordinary culture that tolerates that stuff?
because you might have. I don't want to kind of say it's not possible, but it's of course you can have the CEO and the board and the top management embracing this culture. But if you have a bigger organization and you want this to work, you would have to have it work for everyone, and that's that's a huge task.
Do you know who the number one the number one hedge fund company in the world is? Do you happen to know that?
Hedge fund? No, hedge fund. I don't know.
Fundamental investment bank, Bridgewater Capital. You may have heard of them. They're the number one hedge fund in the world. They employ, I think it's tens of thousands of people around the world, and they are one of the poster childs for this kind of culture. And so you've got a hard driving organization that's very, very focused on results and bonuses and all of those things. But 50% of their KPIs are around being able to embody the values of this modern coaching culture. And so it is possible, but it took them about 3 years to actually get there. And they had quite a lot of attrition along the way. So what they had to do is to keep their eye on the prize. What is the benefit to them 3 years from now of being able to do this? Of building this home where people can keep their agendas on the table so that they can grow through all of these self-imposed limitations here. Because that is what is going to derail us 5 years from now. If companies have people that are doing these things, doing these second jobs that they're not being paid for, I'm not certain that they can even survive, let alone thrive.
Yeah. Okay.
So not easy. I totally get it. And a lot of people are going to have this question, which is why companies are going to need a lot of help doing this. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Sure. What else? Anything else? Normally we get a lot more concerns about this type of material. Not today. Everybody's obviously committed to it. Oh wait, there's something on the there's something in chat, I think. If a colleague doesn't have the passion in the job, they just want to earn the money, how do we motivate them? We can't motivate someone else. We can't. So that's just something that we need to know, that it is impossible to motivate somebody else. What we can do is we can find out what inspires them and then see if there is something about what can be created for that individual that inspires them so that they can then motivate themselves. It will be difficult to have individuals in a coaching culture organization that don't care about anything apart from making money. And sadly, these individuals appear to exist. But underneath that story, that the only thing I care about is money, underneath that story is in fact a human being that may not yet have discovered their own sense of purpose. And so what we can try to do is to work with them to uncover what they really care about. The question I like to ask is, and when you have all the money in the world, what is that in, what happens next? And the answer to that question often points to something that they really care about. And then you can see whether or not that can be created within their life. When you have all the money in the world, when you've got the position that you want, what would you do differently then? What would you be caring about then? And it won't always work. So thank you for that question, Muriel. All right, I tell you what then, let's close.
Tony, I'd like to ask you a question, but off the after the end of this.
The record?
Yeah,
Oh,
well, more or less. Yeah, we have an appointment together, and I'm just to discuss that
when is that appointment?
next week.
Okay, sure. Okay, no problems. Yeah, sure. I'll be available. You can give me a call on my WhatsApp.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. And there you go. Just put the email address up once more. Any questions? You want the slides? You want to connect with us about any component of any of this? Then please send us an email. In the meantime, have a great day. The weekend is coming soon, so please do enjoy it. On that note, see you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony, Sam, and Joanne.